goalposts here, that your actual results are going to be 10 years later, not at the end of a midterm, not at the end of a final exam, not at the end of passing out, not at the end of graduation, but 5 years later and 10 years. But how often are we talking to those people to figure out what their aspirations are and how it's changed and what is their path to going there? So all I would say is, while we're putting these new placeholders, we should really talk about them, because we have to accept that the wiring is totally different. The aspirations are not what you are doing. The intellect of a classroom conversation could go to the next level. If both sides display some sense of fragility, you need to lead from the front. This is the next generation, is also about leading from the front. So you have to do it. And I think, yes, because you need to be thoughtful, but overthinking is a big problem, right? Because that is half the reason for failure.
Welcome, Ronnie. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to the student community, the teacher community, the principal community in schools.
I feel that I'm now part of the community. So I think speaking is always a good conversation, which is why it's nice we're having this.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time. And your life has been quite a story of resilience.
You're not going to make me feel too old.
No.
The worst is still to come. The biggest failures have yet to come, but the good things have also yet to
come. Well, it's a great story, and I always know that stories were the best way that I learned in school. And you cared deeply about theater, but I thought, you know, having done some work on your life in the last few weeks in prep for this, I realized that there were so many learnings that we could take back as educators, as school leaders, as principals, as counselors.
Sure.
So I'd
love to put that into context. So maybe when the questions, I'll try and put in context with who's watching this rather than just being a plain storytelling. So happy to do that.
Absolutely. So the first thing that at IC3 we talk about is we ask educators, what chair are you sitting on today? Are you sitting on a chair called I know, which is what happens to a large number of school educators. 10, 15, 20 years of teaching.
Yes.
The educator arrogance comes in the way of evolution for the students as well. And I suffered from that. I actually carry a knife in my back pocket to chop my ego every day. And we choose chairs called I don't know or I want to know. I actually saw you do that throughout your career. And tell us a little bit more about it, because you have, you know, you've gone into so many different spaces that were unknown, from toothbrush manufacturing, you know, from theater to toothbrush manufacturing to filmmaking, now into education.
Yeah.
What was your general approach when you went into these new areas?
So I think more than new areas, I think the first part of your question is a very important one, a very relevant one, right? In the sense that after a certain stage, is the build-up in your career one of self-conviction, self-confidence, versus I know it all, bordering on, I wouldn't say arrogance, but just that whole context of, I should say something and the world should listen to me, or the room should listen to me. I think that second part is where the flaw lies with most cases, right? Because if you're only talking and not listening, and I'm not saying everyone doesn't do that, but real listening is becoming more and more difficult today. Hearing is very easy, respectful is very easy. People have a conversation saying yes sir, no sir, and I keep saying, let's get to the real brass tacks of it. So I think you raised a relevant point, and I think in the entire learning education system, I think it is onerous. It is very onerous for us to be open-minded. Reinvent is a little bit of a bigger word, and it's a difficult one, because if you hear it, most people will say, but I have a sandbox, I have a curriculum, I have some goals to achieve. If I compromise on those goals, then I'm going to be so the fundamentals that you need to put in place versus many other sectors, where in healthcare, even healthcare, which is similar to what we do as onerous, I think is where you can be a lot more innovative. You know, so you can change designs on automobiles, you can change design on the way even how a bypass surgery would happen 10 years back to what is happening today. So the most thought process is stay with the conviction, because this worked. And I would say my first opening line would be most of that, and I've spoken to a lot of people in academia, they're quite convinced that what I'm doing is making my student and later on my learner job ready, entrepreneur ready, and ready for life. And I think less and less of that students are thinking that way. And I think that penny has to drop with people, because the conviction with the academia does remain that 9 out of 10 of my students are employable. So I don't know what's the issue here, you know. And if you have that context, then everything will flow around the fact is the problem that you said. And I don't know whether it's a problem or not, but it definitely needs to move there. You can't put a dynamite stick to it, because there are fair bits of curriculums that you need to follow. So I would just say to everybody here, the urge to accept the fact that maybe today, are we not in connect with what the career options people are looking at? And this is not about just making them job ready, because the whole thing starts at a very early stage. It starts from 3rd, 4th, 5th standard in some ways, 6, 7, 8 standard. And I think the penny dropping moment for me to move from media to education and lifelong learning happened because of our Swadesh Foundation, our not-for-profit Swadesh Foundation in rural India, where we were working with about 800 schools, 600 Anganwadis. And I think like most entrepreneurs, when we wanted the change. So we started the science labs everywhere, we started computer classes, we started English classes. And I think at the end of 4 years, our hearts sank, because when the USR report came, the percentage movement in needle moving was very low. And when I kind of look back at that thought process, the 1 or 2 things that were the most needle moving was when we opened a library in each school in rural India, which otherwise is defined as a library behind a principal with a cupboard with the key locked, and the principal has the key and you can't take your books home. To now the kids and their own library. Attendance went up by 30%. And then cut to 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th standard, career counseling, which we all in urban India take for granted. But ask somebody in rural India, what do you want to grow up? They'll have a very short list. The problem is they can't have a conversation with too many, because the teachers are not exposed. They can't talk to their parents, because they're worried. The parents are worried that if I ask that question, if they pop an answer, I may not be able to afford it. And I've not done that before. So if you look at that whole segment, to give you as an example, to come back to your first question of are we accepting and are we changed? This is where the change would happen. So career counseling and libraries changed the destiny of the schools we were working on in many ways, where attendance skyrocketed. And completion records of 8th standard going to 12th standard, 11th, 10th standard, 1st and 12th standard went up a lot. That was a huge penny dropping moment for me. And I think the second one today I would urge everyone is that we need to keep an open mind, that if you think today what you're doing in the classrooms is making people either employable or to start their own, I would say if that's the goalpost, because whether you're doing liberal studies or whether you're doing vocational studies or whatever we're teaching here, at the end of the day, we're asking people to make progress and go into the real world. If that litmus test fails, you can be sitting on a pedestal.
Ronnie,
I hope I'm not being too blunt for a community.
No, I think that's fair. I think the one thing we do with IC3 is be vulnerable and be bluntly honest. So I'm glad that you're sharing what you're sharing. But there's also this thing about your story. There isn't a template that was followed. When I've interacted over the last 25, 28 years with students and families, there almost seems to be like an endpoint to learning. There seems to be, once he gets this degree, he'll be fine. Once he gets this job, he'll be fine. Once he gets through school, he's going to be fine. So it almost feels like there's an endpoint. But with you, it just appears that unique path, and you know, I've heard a lot of conversations where your surname became a subject of discussion. And I thought I should also keep the legacy up and talk about your surname. I said, in a way, you are unscrewing many ideas that young people and educators have, and you are rescrewing some new ideas. You are actually helping do that. And I know how much of a struggle that has been for educators. The inertia is so high in society.
We need to be quite clear, it's not with educators. I think it's all of us.
All of us.
I think we should be all clear, otherwise that we don't want to put that into a box.
Sure.
That can happen in almost every field. It happens in corporate India. It happens everywhere else, where that entire cycle comes there. specifically in education, it's a lot more onerous, and the spotlight is much more there. Because if you're not making that, then the whole system is that.
Yeah.
In an organization, you can move, people leave, there's attrition, things churn. If you haven't met your financial goals, you'll be spotted out, the results will be different. Here, the results are 15 years later. And I think that's something that we need to understand that. Because most people now think that getting the best results for that year, that is that pressure point that has to be completely, that pressure cooker has to open up there. Because that's not really the goalpost. So our goalposts have been much more short term. That if I excel in this, I'll get a good opportunity. If I excel at this stage, my admission to a better university will be Y. And then if I do that, the world is my oyster.
I think that's
the world is not your oyster anymore.
That's so relevant. The outcome of what we do becomes visible after 15 years. Yeah. It's not visible, and the damage or the benefit is already accrued.
Damage, but
the benefit has already accrued if it's gone well for a student and.
But I'll tell you, it also puts the onus on the young individual much more. Because then you realize this at a particular stage where maybe from a parental point of view, we put that pressure, but it's here. And from an academia, you put pressure here. And then all of those support systems are gone and you're in the real world. And then you sort of introspect. So the pressures are even more. And I think that's really where, if we can redefine this system of goalposts here, that your actual results are going to be 10 years later, not at the end of a midterm, not at the end of a final exam, not at the end of passing out, not at the end of graduation, but 5 years later and 10 years later. And I think today it's urgent and it's our responsibility, because we are not going to become a Viksit Bharat or an advanced country the way America became or the way China. We have to find our own way. And if the youthful demographic is an advantage, then we have a lot of work to do, because it can become a huge responsibility also. Yeah. And that's why I think in this entire system, we need to be able to figure out where the goalposts are.
Subject as a skill, that's IC3's pedagogy. We follow the counseling laboratory pedagogy. And for us, counseling is about context, meaning making every school day meaningful and full of purpose. Even the school assembly, the lunch break, the geography class, young people need to find purpose. And we were born out of a survey of grumpy 35-year-olds on Monday mornings. We were trying to figure out what's the correlation between what happens in school and what happens at work. We figured that 93% of the kids worldwide in schools were bored, and 84% of the world's working population was disengaged. So the bored kid in school was the disengaged worker as an adult. And we started to fix that in 2016, and we brought in the counseling laboratory pedagogy, which said that this kid needs to find the same adventure he finds in a computer game or in social media. He has to find that in his physics class or is in his English class. So I know that you've focused a lot about.
I want to just interrupt here before you come to the question. I think we are fooling ourselves if today we believe that we then need to impart that with the kid, her or him. They figured it out. Now they have to go with that path because that's the path you put down there. But if you ask them, you want to launch a product, you do a focus group. You want to move in and you want to change something in life, you talk to 40 people. If you want to start something, you will always go. You want to make a change in your building society, you will call a building society meeting. But how often are we talking to those people to figure out what their aspirations are and how it's changed and what is their path to going there? So all I would say is, while we're putting these new placeholders, we should really talk about them, because we have to accept that the wiring is totally different. The aspirations are not what you are doing. The dinner table conversation cannot be follow this and I guarantee you'll see success, because nobody can do that. That world has changed forever. So I would just urge that even when we start putting these place blocks that says we're innovating and changing, how much have we connected with our core group? At that stage, we just think they're too young, so they're not a target audience, because now we need to tell them, this is not the place for us to get feedback. I think that DNA has to change.
Super. And what I was coming to was also every subject as a skill. And you've been working on upskilling and all of that. with Atlas, with upGrad, and all of the work that's going on. And we work with many kids in rural India who would never go to college. They would drop out in 9th grade or 10th grade or 11th grade. And they are teachers we were working with. And we were trying to figure out how can you make their subjects relevant even if they ended up dropping out of school. I mean, we really wish that they reached university.
Yeah.
So you leave with physics as a skill, math as a skill, English as a skill, rather than leave with a set of subjects.
Yeah.
So what could educators be telling their students around developing skills while in school rather than just learning certain subjects, which kind of phase out and become redundant?
And I can only tell you, I'm experiencing a very different Bharat when I'm looking at when we work in Swadesh and here. I think the spoon feeding part has gone away. And I think what you can do is one part. But the fact of the matter is, even in rural India and in urban India, people are now figuring it out that let me go out and do my own thing also. Because today, even when people are looking at jobs, I feel everyone will need to have 2 and 3 jobs every given time. I don't think we're ready for that. So when you're going back to this, and I don't mean that you're going to be unfaithful to one job or you're going to spread your wings and you're going to be out of focus. When I talk to people who says, I've got my degree, where's my job? My first question is, sorry, but who are you asking that question to? What sense of entitlement that you have? And it's a disappointment for them because they feel, I need to ask somebody, I need to ask my parents, my teacher, or the government. But that moment is gone. So at that stage, when people say, will AI today and tomorrow disrupt that? I'm saying, stay with your job, find something else. Be self-employed in another part because that's your plan B, because you're going to go through those roller coasters. So the kids of today and the students of today and the forever learners of today are actually figured this out. And they have alternative mediums to now get that information from, form their own conclusions. I'm seeing a different Bharat where I'm seeing the conversations that happen with peer groups of people in the 7th standard or when you're passing out of college to be very strong. They're drawing on each other for support to figure out what they want to do in the future. That needs to get harnessed.
And what role can educators, you think, play in this, facilitating this process?
I think we need to be a little bit more realistic. I think we need to level with people. I think the question is that sometimes for all of us to feel also a little nimble or a little bit fragile is not bad, right? We don't need to air all sense of confidence. Fragility is a very important aspect of learning for teachers, for professors, for all of us. Like, sure, this can happen. So the more you build trust with that community that says, I'm going to tell it to you as it is, and not fear you out of it, but just tell it to you as it is, because that forms a very different dialogue. The intellect of a classroom conversation could go to the next level. If both sides display some sense of fragility and some sense of trust and some sense of openness in the ability, rather than get worrying that if I say this, what is that repercussion? I'll have a PTA meeting and my parents will tell me, why are you making all my kids nervous? No, I'm not making them nervous. But that, I wouldn't say that guts, but that clarity you need to have, because the outcome will be different. And I think we don't have a choice. I think today we all think we do have a choice. Let's see how it goes. Let's continue with the present way, and let's see how it goes. And if all else fails, I'll blame it on AI.
And this whole ability to teach in a way and to exist in schools in a way where there is love versus fear. Schools were essentially, from what I discovered, they were built for compliance. They were built for, the industrial age, the early industrial revolutions, memorize, repeat, follow instructions. And the collective consciousness of schooling is, like every country has a collective consciousness, every family has a consciousness. Schooling consciousness has been compliance. So what we find is industry changes the fastest, then universities, and then schools. This love, and I'm sensing, and you have to tell us about your life, were these love-based decisions, a lot of changes that you made, the moves that you made? Because at IC3, we've been trying to bring love-based existence in school. Wanting to go to school on Monday morning versus, I don't know what it was for you, Ronnie, but when school shut down, I was the happiest
It
in...
was different. I think from the beginning to the 8th standard, I was in a school called Dunn's Institute, which is in the middle of kind of nowhere.
Okay.
Low social, because I come from a lower middle class background, so it was a low socio-economic one. So I think the no sense of entitlement taught me incredible amount of things at that particular point in time, which I think is very, very different. And I see that when we're looking at our Swadesh Foundation in our schools. When you start with that low sense of entitlement, everything is a strong learning curve for what you want to do. The other way is you have your box and you already got that peer pressure to go there. So I think I was fortunate that there wasn't that kind of peer pressure, good competitive environment, but a good grounding at that stage. And then something happened, and my dad got a professional job somewhere else, we moved a location, and then I went into cathedral. Right? But that was in the 8th or 9th standard. And that was a completely different experience. And now most people would have thought, oh, but wait a minute, you're not coming from a well-to-do background. How are you going to fit in there? Everyone brings their cars. Lunch table is opened by a driver. And here I was trying to get the BST bus to go there. So it's a different experience. But I don't think I felt alien in either of those two. And I didn't feel alien there. And I think I picked up a new set of values for what to look at there. And I think when I went into college, that became a very different context where I think the pursuit for me was that I think I'm going to be faster learning on my own. So that was that was my realization into the second year of college, that I think, I'm going to be faster learning on my own. And therefore you need to have that mix and match. Yeah. But I think that was many, many years ago. Today the environment is so different that whether we like it or not, that parallel learning has to be there.
Is it possible to have love-based learning versus fear-based learning? Is that something that you experienced building businesses? And
I don't think fear should exist anywhere, right? Because fear is only within yourself. I mean, the whole fear of failure is actually what closes you down and shuts you down, not only the failure.
And that's a huge crisis. We are the only country, and so we have a averting student suicide task force at IC3, where well-being is a big part of what we do. Worldwide, the #1 reason for adolescent deaths is road accidents. In India, it's suicide. So we're talking about a very significant challenge, and we're seeing that in schools. And there's a lot of fear and anxiety to succeed. So is that something that you would say comes?
That onus comes from the environment outside of the kids.
Yes.
Not that responsibility. I can't say very brutally with parents and with teachers, but there is a pressure point. There is an environment. But it's also where I'm not getting my self-confidence that I will be able to make something. I'm not seeing that ray of hope. So, there's a fear that's a negative sentiment. But I can overcome a lot of that fear if you give me some sense of hope. But that sense of despondency leads you to a sort of a mental caliber. But I think, therefore, fear is not in that context, but we need to get into hope. I'm not sure exactly what the love concept comes about there. Do I want to feel wanted? Do I want to feel warm and fuzzy for the kids? Yeah, is that the age? No. I think that balance, yes, you need a good, strong family balanced life, but too much of love can be a problem.
And I was referring also more to love for the subject. Students don't love or hate. They don't love or hate subjects. They tend to love or hate teachers. And I love my math teacher, and I became a math teacher.
But I think that is a little more to do with storytelling. Because I think if somebody can simplify something and I can learn and I can relate to that in my present life, that's why I love the teacher. I don't love the teacher because she's allowing me to eat popcorn in class. I'm loving the teacher because the ability for her to connect and communicate with me is high. Absolutely. That love connect is a connect problem. It's a storytelling problem. It's how much I'm retaining from that, how I can do that, how less studying I'll have to do in this class because I kind of paid attention because of the way it was done.
No, absolutely. And therefore, our whole mandate is every teacher as a counselor first. So if I'm a math teacher and I taught math, I would be able to contextualize that math with the real world. I'd get young people to fall in love with math. Yeah. You love football, you kick that ball, that's your parabola. Yeah. So I would teach football on the math field, I would teach math on the football field. And that was the way kids fell in love with mathematics. Yeah. And so this whole idea that, learning we hear a lot of arguments about work-life balance. And we've always said at IC3 that this is one of the worst expressions, work-life balance, because it appears as though work is the punishment I have to endure for a life at the end of it. Whereas what we're referring to more is personal life and professional life balance. You want to have your own personal life and you want to have your professional life. But this is born out of schooling, where academics is the punishment and the playtime is the reward. So when they start to see the fun and the joy and the love in their academics, they also start to find it, in life.
Which is why I gave you my example of the library. The library period was a look forward to. Now, library period in a normal school here in urban India would be neither no big deal, quiet time, whatever else. So yes, absolutely. But that environment would need to necessarily change.
Yeah. And you talked about unlearning quite a bit. You've even talked about 50% of what you learn in business school, etc., must be unlearned.
That's an important one, because I think most people think that I have to forget something. So I think unlearning is looked at this antidote. It looks like, I've got to forget some things. I think unlearning is brushing aside and moving your priorities. That what you thought was relevant, the relevance is moving forward. So unlearning is not 50% of all those chapters out. These chapters are done in. It doesn't work that way. It means that relevance is moving along where 90% I'm being more relevant and 10% I'm leaving back the irrelevant. That part, I think, everyone's looking at unlearning, learning in a very clinical manner. That you just feel this much is out and this much is new. It's about how, and you could circle back 10 years later, and that 20% that you left behind is something you will pick up. And our memories go back where the longer the memories, they stay a lot more in your mind in that context, where you could be circling back on your unlearning and picking it up. That's the nimbleness that you need for unlearning, learning, not the binariness that people got about.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because one of the goals that we've had as well is that educators, we need to unlearn a lot of things that we've learned about schooling, about teaching, about the classroom, and that process, I think
it's about how much more relevant I am today than what I was yesterday. If that leads to you, that unlearning, learning is a momentum context. It's a question of move towards more relevance today and not to the irrelevance in that context. What you did 3 years back for students might not be as relevant for them too, not for you. I think that is the one mix here, that we kind of disregard that this community, we know pretty much what should be imparted to them versus let's listen to them.
Next 10 years, we're in our 10th anniversary year, Ronnie, and we're really looking forward to all that we've manifested in the last 10 years, but we're looking forward to our next decade. And a lot of our focus is on educators going within, working on themselves. 30% of their time is on personal, professional development, and 70% with the students. That's the goal that we set ourselves. How important a role has self-work, self-evolution? Have you been very conscious about it in your life?
Maybe I break that into two parts. Firstly, the next 10 years will have to be broken up into the next, I think whatever you're setting out for 10 years, for the last 10 years, if you're not doing that portion in the next 2 years, it's going to be irrelevant. And therefore, your next 10 years will have to have more harsh breakups than your last 10 years. And is that what everyone is doing? Would be my first call for action, alarm bell for everybody. Because otherwise it becomes a very slow process and it's going to get less and less relevant. So your ROI, so to speak, on whatever your effort you're going to do for the next 10 years, if it's not brought forward it won't have the impact and become a law of diminishing returns in what you think is the change. That would be very, very critical. But the timing, break it up into maybe 5 different goalposts. And one is hard, the other 4 are soft. At the end of 2 years, you need to validate that to see where the world is, where everybody else is. What is your consumer point? The kids that you're teaching, the faculty or whatever else, what are you going there would be the first part. And your main question was?
So we set ourselves the objective that educators kind of double down on working on themselves and, being more mindful and, so is that something that you have certain practices or recommendations?
Well, I think it's different of what you think of being mindful, right? Because it all depends on your opening balance. Because if you're introspecting, saying again that this is the axis on which I'm going to go, which is that I pretty much know what I was doing, and now I need to be a little bit more contextual. I don't think it will go very far. So I think if everyone's first accepting not a full reboot, but a re-indexing, I think maybe that are the conversations we need to have in 2026. If you're laying 2026 to 2036, let's break it up. Whatever you wanted to think you would take 5 years to do, let's make it in 2 years. Because today the definition of long term is not 5 years and 10 years. Which organization, which company where you want to send somebody to the moon? You think ISRO had a plan 5 years back or space at 5 years back? They're doing one now in 2 years. Not because 5 other countries are doing that. That's just because the resources available to you are allowed to be done. So I think that would be one. And I think just introspection and self-improvement on your base camp, if that is not changing, I have to be candid enough to say, if you ask me from my point of view, if I only thought of it, this is what I did in media, this is what I did in my career, and I'm taking those. No. I mean, one of the key things I talk to people, for example, when I moved out of one sector and moved into another, a lot of the people who worked with me before said, you're starting something new, why aren't you calling me to come and work with you? And I'm saying, but I don't think you'll learn anything, and I won't learn anything fresh. We know each other, you'll finish the sentence I've started, which is all great, but that's not going to challenge any of us. So I think that element of acceptance is an evolution.
And the last thing I wanted to share, you often push people into the deep end, and you've gotten.
I've always been thrown the deep end.
Yeah, so
it's just been my instinct to do that.
So my whole life journey, I've followed and read Lao Tzu quite a bit, and he says that when the leader is forgotten, the work is done. Yeah. Was that very intentional, that you would go into new spaces, not bring new people and push them into the deep end, and kind of delegating and giving away things came very naturally, or?
You need to swim the deep end yourself. You can't keep pushing people into the deep end if you're already outside the pool.
Of course.
I don't think you can be outside the pool and just keep pushing people in the deep end and then talking from outside says, come on, let's swim, let me board you. You need to lead from the front. This is the next generation, is also about leading from the front. So you have to do it. And I think, yes, because you need to be thoughtful, but overthinking is a big problem, right? Because that is half the reason for failure. So a lot of people say, yeah, but this one's a hard call, that one's a hard call. And I'm saying, but the fact that you're not taking a call is the reason why it's become a little hard, right? Any food that's there, now you put it there, it's frozen. So now to thaw it, you have to wait 15 minutes before your armrest comes out, so you can start liking the armrest again after it's melted for 15 minutes. So I think we freeze ourselves in too many ways. So for me, I think the question of leading from the front, understanding a few things, but a lot of this is going to happen on the flow. But it needs a little bit of tenacity and a lot of openness. If you're in the mode of being extremely thoughtful and need empirical evidence, I would not suggest diving into the deep. Because you'll be starting to logicalize when you actually need to start swimming.
Yeah.
So that might be a big gap.
5% thinking, 95% action, is that?
I think even the other way, unless you go the other way, even 50-50 is not okay.
Yeah. But 5 and 95 is okay? Yes. So I'm just trying to get it from you, because that's where we are at with what we do at IC3, and it's about. Yeah. So Ronnie, it's been a pleasure. I have to say I turned into a fanboy about 3 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, I knew very little about you until I came here, and our path has been that of being vulnerable, being authentic, taking out all the masks, surrendering to service and self-reflection. That's really what IC3 has been about. And as we embark on this journey, and we only talked about the next decade because we're finishing a decade, But as we embark on this journey in the next decade, we'll continue to draw inspiration from all your successes. And we're grateful for...
my failures also.
Yes, and your failures are also your successes in a way. I mean, I read...
For everybody.
Yeah, and so hopefully you can come back and, teach a 2-hour course or a 4-hour course.
I think I'll be able to teach, but I'll be happy to share.
Yeah, you can share.
Very, very different word, because then people will draw from it. Teach sounds like a one-on-one where, it's my way or the highway, or this is what I want to say.
Yeah,
but share is what different people pick up in a room or what you will say.
Beautiful. That's the deconditioning that we need to do as well as educators start using the right words. So we'd invite you to share with us, with educators, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. Pleasure.